What are in-kind donations and should a nonprofit accept these? Well, in-kind donations represent donations of something other than money, often goods and services. So why would a nonprofit accept these in-kind donations? Well, first of all, donated services like volunteer hours can end up being the fuel of the mission. And without it, some nonprofits would absolutely fail to exist. I think of a practical example of this as Meals on Wheels. That program is driven solely by the volunteer hours that spend time delivering these meals to the people that are homebound. So that's an in-kind service, in this case, volunteer hours. Some in-kind services actually impact the budget. So they're kind of almost exactly or the equivalent of a cash donation. In these cases, a nonprofit's budget or what they know it costs to operate would include purchasing maybe like professional services for counseling. If you have a program that serves a population that you serve with counseling services, well, your budget may then have something that you plan to spend on counseling services. And if you find someone who's willing to give those services in lieu of being compensated for them, that is an in-kind donation of service. A couple of other examples would be the accounting services, maybe legal or graphic design, web design. Some of those can be good in-kind services to solicit, to ask for, and that can really benefit your nonprofit's bottom line. There's also in-kind gifts of goods, and goods are really things that you would normally purchase. They're important purchases that are in your budget, but you may find you have, say, for example, you've got, a large campus of facilities and you buy toilet paper and you happen to find someone connected to your program who has a supply company and they run into a huge inventory of toilet paper. And so they donate all the toilet paper to you. Well, that would be an in-kind donation of goods, and it would be money that would be saved that the nonprofit could spend on other important things. Okay, next question is, how do you acknowledge the receipt of an in-kind donation? Well, let me first say there is very important, very detailed guidance from the IRS on how we substantiate or we receipt charitable donations. And I'll refer you to that. I'll link here. Publication 1771 from the IRS will be a good guide on that. So I'm not going to cover that today, but I want to focus here on what's different for in-kind donations. And the first and most important thing is you cannot assign a value. You cannot assign a dollar amount to the in-kind donation. You can only state what was received and when it was received. That's all you can say on the actual receipt back to the donor. And the reason for this is that tax deductibility of something it's really pretty complicated. And so it's a matter that that individual donor has to take up and to defend on their tax deductions or their tax return as a deduction. So you can't get involved in that. And so you'll want to just leave it at what was received and when was it received. Okay, so how do you record those in-kind donations in your accounting records? Well, while you may desire to track every kind of in-kind, volunteer hours and gifts of this and that and the other, you can track all of those in your donor records. So if you have a system for keeping track of donations, you'll want to track them there because you want to know where people give, what they like to give, how they serve, how they connect. But from an accounting standpoint, you can only book income on your accounting records for goods that you would have normally received or purchased, but you've received in kind instead. So the toilet paper example. And you book those goods at fair market value, or what you would have paid for them on the date they were donated. And that's a expense to the organization offset by an in-kind revenue. So you're still tracking what it really costs to run your program by tracking that expense, but then you're also acknowledging this gift came by an in-kind as opposed to cash donation. Okay, the next area is services, and they get a little more complicated. Okay, a lot more complicated. Generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP, say that you can only include services that are performed by professionals with a specialized skill. So think doctors, accountants, lawyers. And then the other criteria is that, and you would have also purchased them. So They're performed by professionals, and you would have had to purchase them to carry out your program. Here again, you value the value that you use for accounting entry is the fair market value, or what you would have paid for those services if you were purchasing them. Volunteer time, well, it's very critical to a lot of nonprofits. It regretfully does not qualify for recording it in the financial records according to generally accepted accounting principles. The values that are used, remember here, for in-kind donations are internal only. You do not want to publish what you book in your accounting records to your donors, because as we've talked about, you cannot assign value or communicate a value of a donation to the donor. So there's some tips on in-kind donations. I hope that you're wildly successful and receive a lot of them. They really can go a long way and be an excellent help in getting your mission accomplished.